What are the meta decks after the ban list? Big dogs, the ban list has actually created a seismic shift in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, and today we're going to be talking about what would be the next powerful decks in the game that you can be using. This video is incredibly important for you to know whether if you're deciding to pick up on one of these decks or if you want to know what decks to beat. And of course, as per usual, I'll also be putting personal deck lists on my Patreon as a special thank you for helping me pay my editors. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with y'all, big dogs? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. In case you're new here, big dogs, I have a special segment called Update Monday. This is a particular time where I trick you into thinking that it's a Yu-Gi-Oh video, but in actuality, I want to make you a better person overall. Don't worry, if you're just here for Yu-Gi-Oh, there are timestamps. So one of the biggest things that I want to talk to you guys is never give up on your passions. I think that someone that gives up on their passion dies two deaths. The first is when they stop doing what they love, and the second is the eventual death. And that's something that you never want to do. So I got back into football. I mean, to be honest with you guys, it was only inevitable for me to get back into football. But the crazy thing about it is that when you're passionate about something and you have a reset, you can do pretty well. It's been my first time back on the field and who knows how long, and your boy caught a 3-sack game, pressures every single snap. And I don't even be playing D-line like that. They just needed a boy to be able to take control of a game. We lost. But the big thing about it is getting back and staying passionate. That's how we stay young, that's how we stay ourselves, and that's how we advance in life. Just like how you may not be happy about the new ban list. In fact, it's one of the biggest we've had to date. Big dog, with huge hits to both Yugioh and Malice and other cards not being hit, it actually is an entire metagame shift that we have to talk about when it comes to meta after the ban list. In fact, if you want to know every detail about the ban list, you can go ahead and check out the video that I did yesterday, but let's go ahead and start talking about those hits and how it is going to have a huge impact. The first thing that we have to unwrap are the huge hits to both Malice and Yugioh, pretty much having their entire decks semi-limited. I actually think that this is really huge for the Yu-Gi-Oh card game because if we're being so honest, decks like Malice and Yugioh are walking one-card combos. And having so many resources to get into your full combo while other strategies are still playing catch-up, this is one of those hits that helps take some of the best decks in the game and bring them down to some of the other strategies that we're trying to compete. There's also a really secret hit about Yugioh. Losing Bonfire to 1 actually puts Yugioh players in a huge conundrum. You see, not only do those Yugioh hits lower the consistency, but the Bonfire hit is secretly smart because Bonfire was the reinforcement of the army with the deck with no restriction. There is a new card that allows Yugioh to still be super consistent and play different variants. 7th Tachyon is going to be a good card, but it comes with a major drawback of locking you into Exceeds for the rest of the turn. It means that if you are playing a Fiendsmith Yugioh version, the deck can become a little bit more tricky and is actually susceptible to more cards like Droll and Lockbird. I still think Yugioh will be one of the most powerful decks in the game, especially seeing that it is getting more support from Alliance Insight, but for right now it is considerably weaker. The same thing with Malice. I think some of the biggest hits that happen aren't just the Malice monsters on the ban list. With the banning of Link Decoder and Nightmare Griffin, some of the hugest hits that you could ever imagine, those cards actually bring down a ton of utility for Malice. And admittedly, the banning of Abyss Dweller and Bahamut Shark is also as equally huge against pure Yugioh decks. These two particular hits put Malice in a position where one-card combos aren't as easy to come by, and your inboard can't revolve around putting Nightmare Griffin in the extra monster zone or the main monster zone in the middle to be able to lock out your opponent from monster effects. What I think Malice does from here is that it'll consider playing more Cyberse cards. Keep in mind, players did not use Signet Mining before, and this card could actually help boost up the consistency, with the drawback of this card being a pretty huge choke point against the deck. There's also the new card in Mathmech Circular. That card could actually be a genuine player for Malice, seeing that it is a Cyberse monster to help them extend forward. That alongside Mathmech Sigma and Mathmech Equation can breed a whole new wave of Malice support. And keep in mind, while this deck does get direct support from Alliance Insight, it also gets a ton of Cyberse support in general. While I think that those are some of the biggest losers in the ban list, the biggest loser in the ban list is by far Mermail. You see, I don't think that it's really a huge problem that it lost Abyss Dweller. In fact, the loss of Abyss Dweller can be seen as a plus for Mermail players, but it's really huge that the deck did lose Bahamut Shark, and it's not for the reasons that you think. You see, Bahamut Shark was incredibly powerful for decks like Yugioh, as the 7 Tachyon builds that can be surrounded by surfacing big jaws allow you to be able to get into Shark, which allows you to be able to summon Totally Awesome. I think that was the real reason why this card was addressed, but the huge blow is that Mermail doesn't have a consistent rank 4 monster to detach materials. And that's a huge problem, and it's simply because it's going to be almost impossible to get searches off of Atlantean Dragoons with Water Exceed monster effects. After the ban list dropped, chat and I spent a good 30 minutes trying to figure out some good substitutes. Exceed monsters that can detach a water monster to trigger your Dragoons effect to be able to search a Sea Serpent that you need. And the best card that we came up with was Snow Dust Giant, which is definitely a card that you can use, but is nowhere near strong enough to be able to help propel the deck forward. You see, water decks don't necessarily need Bahamut Shark Totally Awesome to push them forward, but they need something a little bit stronger than Snow Dust Giant. Another card that we considered playing was Magic-y Spirit Verapathu, and this card allows us to be able to add a normal monster from our deck or graveyard to our hand. I thought that that was pretty good because it does allow us to trigger Dragoons and can get a level 4 water monster to our hand to discard with effects like Mermail Abysteus. There's cards like Guard Dragon Justicia, which just so happens to be a tuner monster, and then there's Magicalibra, which is a tuner, and it also has a pretty decent pendulum effect. Sea Serpent Warrior of Darkness just so happens to be a Sea Serpent monster for plays and 1800 attack. But to be honest with you, I could just be coping and Mermail could just be dead. At least in terms when it comes to being a going first, build a really good board type Yu-Gi-Oh deck, but as a going second deck, it still can be pretty powerful. I would personally say that the jury is out, but it being a top 5 meta deck is probably out of the question. Now, those would easily be 3 losers of the ban list, but when I say that there are some winners, there's actually just as many winners. Memento just took the Yu-Gi-Oh world by storm by winning a YCS. And this was just before the hits of decks like Yugioh, Malice, and Mermail. Memento is crazy strong. If we stay in this Exceed-based Yu-Gi-Oh meta, the Goblin Biker cards provide huge support. Goblin Biker Doug the Charger allows us to be able to search Goblin Biker Grand Diddy Breakout, but also allows players to get Goblin Biker Grand Entrance. Both of these cards are really good at dealing with the now limited Yugioh Detonator and other Exceed monsters that Yugioh players will probably pivot to, like Baguska Pass. You see, I have a huge feeling that Yugioh players are nowhere near done. They have a trap card called Yugioh Plasma Hole, which was actually a crazy good Yu-Gi-Oh card, allowing them to be able to destroy cards on the field and then Exceed someone on your opponent's turn. It's underrated, and it might just start getting played a lot more. That would keep Yugioh in top contention, but would also allow Memento to be a solid counter against Yugioh. And with cards like Dimension Shifter and Abyss Dweller finally being banned, that is such a huge boost for the Memento strategy. It is one of those decks that can compete. One thing I will say about Memento is that this deck is incredibly hard to play. You have to genuinely be on your P's and Q's because it isn't your standard run-on-the-mill, hand-trap your opponent and play Yu-Gi-Oh deck. You have to understand the interaction and nuance between all of your Memento cards, which is pretty rewarding because I think that that's what Yu-Gi-Oh should be about. Other decks that this ban list easily benefited were the Primite decks, but in particular, Blue Eyes Primite is going to have a field day. Hits the Dweller and Dimension Shifter were 100% welcome, but the Bestial Druisworm hit goes a little bit deeper than expected. It's no secret that Bestial monsters are pretty good against Blue Eyes, being able to hit Maiden of White before it can summon itself from the graveyard, and when timed correctly, banishing Blue Eyes White Dragon is actually crazy. The best thing about this particular ban list is that while Bestials aren't dead, the second best Bestial monster is now on the ban list. It's not going to prevent everyone from playing a Bestial engine inside of their deck, but I think it's a huge deterrent, as Bestial Druisworm was a card that felt like it can do it just about all. Getting rid of your opponent's special summon monsters, as well as banishing a light and dark card in the graveyard, forced a lot of players into tough decisions where they had to activate effects to be able to protect their cards when they probably didn't want to do it. And now that you can't max out on Bestial Druisworm, in the deck building process, it does change a lot. Is Bestial Baldrake really that strong to play 3 copies of? I think for some strategies, it might be. But for others, it might become a situation where Bestial Druisworm is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Combined with the other hits on the ban list and the fact that Blue Eyes often plays into Triple Tactics talent, this is easily a pleasant spot for Blue Eyes players to be in. And lastly, the Dark Horse deck that got the biggest benefit off of the ban list, hitting cards like Abyss Dweller, Dimension Shifter, the Bestial monsters. But also one of the biggest players in the Fiendsmiths going completely unscathed is huge, which means that I think that decks like Yubel and Unchained variants are going to be crazy. Now the huge thing is that Unchained Soul of Shavara is now semi-limited. When I say that this makes Unchained a way more playable Yu-Gi-Oh deck, I am not underestimating it. Having a monster that can help you dodge hand traps and having the probability of having this card in your hand a little bit more is just amazing. But also at that same time, facing against less Bestial monsters, less Dimension Shifter, and no Abyss Dweller is one of the biggest things. Yubel was already a strategy that has been consistently topping over the course of this format, and it's actually gotten some clutch wins at major events. I think the biggest reason why players moved away from Yubel is because of cards like Phantom Yubel going to 1, which is fair. Why play a deck that is strong but has more cards on the ban list than some of the other more powerful decks? Now that situation is a little bit more balanced, and it's leaning to be more beneficial to play your Fiendsmith cards with Fiend-based Yu-Gi-Oh decks. But overall, I'm pretty excited to hear what you have to say about this huge meta shift. I know that there are some players that absolutely hate this ban list, and I even know some players that love this ban list. Me, I'm more towards the love. Of course, Big Dog, as per normal, you can voice your opinions down below in the comment section and let me know what you think. But until then, be sure to check out these other videos so I can catch you on the next one.